this awakening that is referred to, is talked about, is not another acquisition of the self. It's not a self-improvement project. You don't add it to as another skill set. If anything, it's a demolition of all that. It's a deconstruction of the self that finds itself in anything. It's not an add-on. It doesn't improve anything. It's not a self-improvement. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make life kind of easier in that sense. It doesn't create more connection. It doesn't facilitate more community. It doesn't improve the way you function in life. You don't get more friends. In fact, the chances are you lose all your friends, because the structures that those friendships were built on are seen through and demolished. I've heard Adyashanti say it's enlightenment, awakening, realization is a demolition project. It's the end of something. But that doesn't mean then it's the beginning of something else. It's just the end of the self that found itself in experience and uses experience as an acquisition to improve the sense of self, so that the self can feel secure or belong or in control or safe. It's much more radical than that. It's much more revolutionary than that. It's much more extreme in a sense than that. Cuts below everything that the self tries to do or wants to do, seeks to do, every strategy that the self employs. This has got to be seen. This has got to be known. Because otherwise there's this kind of strange notion which pervades spiritual communities that if I get, awakened or enlightened or something, it's going to improve my relationships, or I'll be able to connect better with other people. And somehow, insidiously, there's a sense within that the self is going to be somehow improved. There's no improvement going on. It doesn't happen. It's much more the self is seen through. The self is seen. The self, the ways that the self moves, the construct of self is seen. And as it's seen, it's not invested in. And if it's not invested in, then the attachment to it dies. Still, one functions in the world. Still, one has some relationships. But friendships that were built on connection or need, transactional relationships, they're all over, they're done, they're finished. There's only the truth. There's only the truth of this moment, or the devotion to this moment, to this way of being. There's no funny stuff. There's no contracts. There's no give and take. And whilst that sounds like to the self that still wants to acquire stuff or feel safe or whatever it is, that feels like anathema. It feels terrible. It might sound terrible. Sort of breaks the heart, leaves you angry or resentful or abandoned or broken in some way. It's actually the doorway to liberation. Because when you don't need anything from anybody in that sense, then you're free to love in a more unconditional way. You're free to be free in an unconditional way. And there's a much more kind of graceful way of moving about in the world that isn't based on transaction, giving and taking. Because the trouble with the giving and taking is, if you give so you can get, or you're totally dependent on getting your needs met, such as they are, when that doesn't happen, then you're crushed. And then you're crushed and you're back to suffering again. So one is caught in that wheel of suffering. And this is the end of that. This is the end of that suffering that's full of need, or full of the desire to belong to a tribe, or belong to a group, or belong to anything. It's the end of belonging. There's no one here. There's no self to belong. The issue of belonging collapses. The issue of connection collapses. The issue of transaction collapses. One is rendered stark naked of all of those aspects of a self that is ultimately imaginary in many ways, or a dream at least. It's the end of all that. It's the death of transaction, the death of need. And these all sound terrible, but they're beautiful. And that's the irony, because there's liberation from the transactional, needy self, which is ultimately the victim self. It's ruthless. It's radical. And yet, strangely, extremely beautiful, because then there's a freedom. There's a freedom that comes with it, the freedom of clarity, the freedom of the absence of need, and the freedom to free flow. One's life is free flowing because it's lived from a different kind of place. So don't think that you're going to get anything on the spiritual journey. You'll get nothing. The self that wants to get things is seen with compassion, not with cruelty, but with compassion. It's seen because in many ways it's seen as a child trying to get its needs met. And this is about realizing what happens when all of that collapses. The one who needs, the need, the transaction, and the whole structure of the world that's built around this neediness is seen as as an illusion, or the cause of suffering, which is the same thing ultimately. So there's a great falling, a great heart breaking and heart opening, a great mind confusion that comes with these realizations. At first, it's like a decompression. It's like, sinking to the bottom of the ocean. If you do that, you're going to get the bends. You're going to, you have to learn a new way of breathing underwater. So there's nothing there for the self. Don't worry about the self. Let go of the self that wants to find itself in anything. Let go, let go, let go.